As we gather back, I'm actually going to be, if you checked the preaching schedule, you might have been expecting Dr. Amy MacArthur. Sorry, that's not what you're getting this morning, but that's okay. Well, we find ourselves today in the 6th sermon series of our summer speaking series, God Speaks. And today, the title of our message is When God Calls. I just want to say last week, I got a few funny gifts this week, actually, because of what I preached last week. So I won't call anyone out, but I got a few gift cards to a few different franchises. Yeah. So anyways, the main metaphor for this morning is the keg. And no. Yeah. No, that would be good. That would be good. I won't do that. Today, our message series, When God Calls, is what we're calling it. We're going to be focusing on the story of Abraham. Last week, we talked about the story of, talked about the book of Acts. And of course, that's sort of the beginning of the early church. And Genesis is sort of the beginning of the narrative of the Hebrew Bible. So we'll be jumping in there, particularly in the call of Abraham. Hence the title of today, When God Calls. Well, just about every day I get a phone call. Maybe you're the same, maybe you get more, maybe you get less. Recently, my iPhone decided to delete every single contact on my phone. Think about that, every single contact. Now, the phone numbers are there, but the names somehow all disappeared. So I've gotten really good at learning people's phone numbers through this. It's been a good exercise. When an unknown number calls you, though, what do you expect? Well, you don't. You don't know what to expect. There's nothing to expect. It's a complete mystery. Could be a stranger, could be someone you know, could be a mistake. Maybe it's the doctor calling or the dentist. For some reason, the CRA needs $500 in gift cards. I always find that strange. I don't ask questions, but no, maybe it's a scam. Maybe it's an urgent call. There's uncertainty when you get an unknown call from an unknown number. What about this, though? When you get a call from a friend, what do you expect? Well, you expect to hear their voice. You expect their personality to come through on the phone call. Sometimes, depending on the friend, you can predict why they're calling. Sometimes people call for every little thing. Hey, Aiden, I had 2 pieces of toast for breakfast, and it's okay, thanks. Sometimes people call for no reason at all. They just want to talk, so you don't think it's urgent. Some people, they never call, so when they do call, you understand that it must be something important. When an unknown number calls, you don't know what to expect. When a friend calls, you do know what to expect. There's a comfort, a sense of safety, a sense of expectation. So what can you expect when God calls? Well, I want to suggest that God is more like the friend than the stranger. There's certain things we can expect when God puts a call on our lives. Of course, we're not talking about God calling on the phone. If that happens and he's asking for gift cards, hang up. But we're talking about when God is telling someone, he's calling, it's an invitation to be and to do. God called Moses to lead Israel. God called Paul to spread the gospel. God calls us to follow his commands and to follow Jesus, etc., etc. Today, though, we're going to be diving into a very famous call, a very famous biblical call, maybe the most famous call that someone receives in the Bible, and that's the call and story of Abraham. A quick note in this narrative, at one point, it's an important part of the narrative, we just don't have time to go into it, but Abram turns into Abraham, Sarai turns into Sarah, but just for simplicity, I'm just going to be referring to them as Abraham and Sarah, so I don't want emails, okay? You didn't say the right name, I don't. If you do have emails, Carolyn at onthejourney.ca. That's it. All right. Genesis 12, 1-5. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you." So Abraham went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife, Sarah, and his nephew Lot. All the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. This was Abraham's call. The question, though, as we think about when God calls, but what is your call? There's lots that we can be called to. There's general calls to have relationship with God. To, like what we talked about last week, the call to live missionally. As followers of Jesus, we're called to live missionally. To help the poor and the weak. As followers of Jesus, that list goes on and on. But there's also individual calls in our lives. The call to be a grandparent. The call to work in a certain field. The call to be a friend to someone. The call to be a barista, a stay-at-home parent. To pursue a dream maybe that God has placed on your heart, whether that's moving somewhere, starting an orphanage, something big, or something kind of seemingly small. Abraham was called, and you too are called as well. Sometimes we hear this language, so-and-so was called to ministry. And normally what they mean is so-and-so was called to be a pastor. And there's actually some important theologically significant language in that so-and-so was called to ministry. I feel I was called to ministry. But I also kind of hate that language too. Because what does it make it about? It's not just pastors who are called to do something. And it's definitely not just pastors who are called to ministry. My wife, Melora, is called to be a teacher. Some of you are called to be a plumber. Whatever it might be. And guess what? All of those things are ministries. Actually, one of the Baptist distinctives, this is something that if you are a Baptist church, this is true of you, is the idea of the sainthood of all believers. The idea that all people are called to ministry. All people are equally called to minister to each other. So as we talk today, those are the two calls that we can be thinking of. God's general call on your life, the call that everyone shares to live in relationship with God, to live missionally, to be faithful in prayer, and God's specific call on your life. You're called to be a grandparent, a construction worker, a volunteer, a stay-at-home parent. When God calls, and when I say God calls, I mean God calls us into relationship with Him, a life of mission, and also the unique purpose tailored to who He created us to be. Sometimes we can't always say, well, this is the call for everyone, this is a call for me. It's all kind of overlapping. But God is calling us into so much. This is what I think is true. Just 2 points today. When God calls, it's not too late. And we can put that slide up. When God calls, it's not too late. And the second point is it's not too hard. If we go back to the first one, it's not too late. It's not too late for God to use you. That's the point. It's not too late for God to use you. Second point here, it's not too hard. It's not too hard no matter the circumstance. It might be too hard for you, but it's not too hard for God. All right, point number 1, it's not too late. Here's one thing you can expect when God calls you. If He calls you, it's not too late. Remember that in Abraham's call, God said this, I will make you a great nation. But to make Abraham a great nation, He had to give him a great amount of kids. Like there was a gap there. But remember in verse 4 it says this, Abraham was 25 years old when he set out from Haran. No, it doesn't say that. When Abraham was 75, that's what it says. I'm not very good at math, okay? I was trying to count all the seats here for the combined service. You should have seen me. Wasn't good. Well, I can count, okay. But I took stats at Crandall, barely, and look, this math isn't adding up. By every other metric, Abraham and Sarah are too old. Sure, and it's easy to say, how could he not trust God? How could Abraham not trust God? But I mean, fair enough. He was 90 and 100. They were 90 and 100. We're going to be jumping around a little bit in this story, but Genesis 17, verse 17 says this. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and he said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? So God's original call, he was 75. This is obviously some years later. Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? But this is what we need to hear. When God calls, it's not too late. There's some things in my life that I'm too late for. Too late probably to become an Olympic athlete. I probably would have had to play any sport at any point in my life to pursue that career. Yeah, I'm just going to stick with that example, okay? I have another one here. I'm not even going to go into it. There are things that I might personally want that I'm just too late for. But when God calls, it's not too late. For Abraham and Sarah, having a kid was as biologically and circumstantially impossible as me participating in the next Olympics. But when God calls, it's not too late. Remember, we have two different calls we're referencing here. There's kind of general calls for all people, and then also personal calls. How those general calls as followers of Jesus affect our personal lives. Some of us have kids, some of us don't. Some of us live here, some of us don't. How do we work that out? How do we work out that individual call? And you might be saying, look, I know that God wants me to follow him. He has a call on my life. There's something he wants me to do. He wants me to embrace the identity of a child of God, but maybe you're saying it's too late. You don't really know what I have done. You don't really know the sin that I've found myself in. You don't really know the patterns of sin that have taken over my life for so long. Or maybe you feel it's an age thing, like in this case. Well, it's too far gone. I've missed the opportunity. But I want to tell you that's not true. It's not too late. Luke 23, at the crucifixion of Jesus, it says this. One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at Jesus. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly for what we are getting with our deeds that we deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. What a beautiful moment. It wasn't too late for Abraham. It wasn't too late for Sarah. It wasn't too late for the criminal on the cross, and it's not too late for you. God has a call on your life. As we're about to see in the story, though, sometimes we take life in our own hands. And again, I'm not saying there aren't things in life that are just too late, or that everything in life will work out exactly the way you want it. But if it's God's call, his call for you to follow him, to enter into your identity as a child of God. Maybe it's to leave behind cynicism and enter into a deeper joy. Maybe it's a call for you to abandon worry and to trust in him. Maybe there's a specific case. He needs you to love someone who you don't want to love, or forgive someone who you cannot possibly bring yourself to forgive. To start a new way of life. Leaving behind your old one, dying to the old patterns, old sin, old habits. or to move to the place he's calling you to move, or to stay in the place he's calling you to stay, or any of these things, if it's God's call, then it's not too late. Point number 2, it's not too hard. And again, to be clear, the point is when God calls you, it's not too hard for God. Genesis 18:13-14 says this in our story. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." When we start to think something is too hard for God, we start to take it into our own hands. This is a really interesting part of the story. Listen to this, Genesis 12. This is a bit of a longer part of the story. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. He was about to enter Egypt, and he said to his wife Sarah, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared even because of you." When Abraham came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarah was a very beautiful woman. And then Pharaoh's officials saw her. They praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abraham well for her sake, and Abraham acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. But the Lord inflicted serious disease on Pharaoh and his household because of Abraham's wife, Sarah. So Pharaoh summoned Abraham. "What have you done to me?" he said. "Why didn't you just tell me this was your wife? Why did you say, 'This is my sister,' so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abraham to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. Do you see the irony in that? What happened here? So many times God calls us to do something and we doubt. We start to think it's too hard, too impossible. Abraham came up with this fear-based plan because he thought the situation was clearly too hard. Sarah was beautiful, the Egyptians were going to steal her, and clearly God didn't think about that. Not true. God had called Abraham to that point, and so he was going to also lead him through it. But Abraham got scared and took things into his own hands. This happens again later in the story. Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. They're waiting. But she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abraham, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." They're trying to find loopholes. Abraham agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. Once again, Abraham and Sarah, they're taking things into their own hand. They think it's too hard, so they have to start acting. But to me, the really fascinating thing here is that God doesn't give up on them. You would think he would have. If we had someone in our life not holding up a certain side of a covenant or an agreement, we don't really use that language, covenant, but even just a relationship, an agreement, whatever, however you want to think about it. If someone was not holding that up, would we stay faithful? I don't know. But God does. In Genesis 17, God says this, "Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael," and that was the son of the slave that Abraham had with Hagar, Ishmael, "As for Ishmael, I've heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year." God blessed Ishmael even though he came from Abraham and Sarah's moment of doubt. Yet, Ishmael still had dignity, still had worth. God didn't discard that story, he redeemed it. God works through their brokenness. He stays faithful to his covenant and his promises, and I wonder if that's true for us. Sometimes, like Abraham and Sarah, when things get too hard, we take things into our own hands. But when it's God's call, it's not too hard for God. I'll invite the band up at this point. Exodus 34, 6-7 is one of the central verses in the Hebrew Bible. This is when God reveals his character to Moses. Some people would say that this is the most quoted verse in the Bible by the Bible. So it just keeps coming up all over Scripture. And I think this verse explains the character of God, and I think it helps explain this situation as well. It says this: Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. There's a lot there that we don't have the time to go into. But when we mess up, when things get too hard, and we start trying to play the role of God in our own lives instead of trusting him, I think it's important for us to remember that first part. Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. God is faithful, loving, compassionate, even when his people, you and I, are not. But also hear the last part. It seems a little bit like a contradiction, but it's not. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. Life can be hard. Living out God's will can be hard. There's a lot of evil around us, whether that's just circumstances, other people, whatever it might be. There's evil in this world. But one day, all of that evil will go away. It will be gone and dealt with. God's default position is one of mercy, of grace, of being slow to anger. And while we might initially think that God punishing evil sounds kind of harsh, we might not like that idea, no one actually thinks that. When we see war, pain, death, disease, terrorism, all kinds of evil in the world, there's a part of us that cries out, God, won't you just finally end this? Won't you put it to an end? All throughout Scripture, you hear that cry. Often people in Scripture actually think God is too compassionate. And they say, why won't you just end this evil? Thankfully, though, God's base character is compassion and mercy. That's good for someone like me who needs it. For someone like me who sins way more than I should. And in some ways even causes evil myself. But there will be one day when God will take it no more. He will put all sin and evil to rest. So lean into what God is calling you to do. As followers of Jesus, we all have a calling on who we are and what we are to do. And that calling intersects with your specific and individual and personal life right now. So what is it? What might God be putting on your heart? It's never too late to pursue God's call. Never too late to embrace your identity as his child. Never too late to take that next faithful step. And while it may feel too hard for you, it's never too hard for him. He is faithful. He is forgiving. We hold on to the hope that one day all evil will end, but until then, we walk with a God who is compassionate, loving, and near. The story of Abraham reminds us that when God calls, it's never too late for him to work through us or for us to respond in faith. No matter your age, your past, or your present circumstances, his call still stands. And no matter how daunting the call may seem, it's never too hard for him, even when we doubt, even when we take matters into our own hands, even when the path is painful, confusing, or nothing like we would have imagined. God remains faithful, compassionate, unshaken in his promise. Again, we hold onto the hope that one day evil will end. But until then, we walk with a God who is compassionate, loving, and near. Amen.